in IVF and hopefully challenge some of the ways that you think about the new technology that we bring in. And some people did tweet. So thank you for those people that tweeted about my earlier talk. I appreciate that. So, what is an adjunct? I'm going to explain this to you. And I'm going to talk about evidence-based medicine. I think in IVF, we really don't practice enough evidence-based medicine. I'm going to talk just about a few of the procedures that are on the adjunct list and give some examples showing the evidence, and then talk about the future. So, what is an adjunct? Well, an adjunct is any technique that is a variation or add-on from the normal IVF cycle. And some people like to argue about this, but in my mind this is very, very straightforward and very clear. But I also want to include in there any diagnostic technique that is of unproven benefit. So there, for example, I'm thinking of things like DNA sperm fragmentation, etc. But this isn't just my work. I want to show you where this has come from. But I do appreciate the comment made this morning that there was no real, well, there was a lot of research around developing IVF, but at some point we have to move forward. So I think we have to work somewhere in between offering our patients the best service and offering them evidence-based medicine. So the history behind my interest in this is that I've worked on pre-implantation diagnosis since the early 90s. And when I set up the consortium, I was very aware that we used to get a lot of cycles come through that had done PGS for young women, for women on their first attempt. And when I questioned why we were doing, what were the indications for PGS, back in the 90s, in the mid-90s, it was a very foggy area. So this was the first reason why I started to question what we were doing for our patients and whether we were offering them a good service. And then I wrote this paper with some colleagues back in 2011. And the reason I wrote this paper is because I'd been around the ESHRA exhibition hall, I think it was about 2008, might have been 2009. And it was the first year that the embryoscope had arrived. So the people selling the embryoscope were saying to people that came that this machine would improve your IVF success. So I listened to the guy selling this machine for a few minutes, and then I asked him what evidence he had that it's going to improve the IVF success. And he then got very nervous, and he said, "We haven't done any tests yet." And I said, "Okay, let's even backtrack. What have you done to show that this new incubator and the new dishes that you have are safe for the culture of human embryos?" And his reply is, "We have grown some 3 pronucleated embryos in the new embryoscope." Okay, I don't think at that time that was enough safety or evidence to make the claims that he had made. So that was about 10 years ago, and I'll talk about time-lapse in a moment. So I was standing at the embryoscope stand with Daniel Bryson, a professor of reproductive science in Manchester University, and Daniel and I then spoke about this, and I said, I think we need to be very careful about how we bring new technology into the IVF lab. So we wrote this paper, and it caused quite a lot of discussion since that time. But there have been some other work. So I am part of the HFEA committee called the SCAP committee, and we have developed a website for patients, which I will show you later, which is giving them information about the IVF add-ons that they may be offered and talking about the evidence. So we have done that work, and then we wrote a paper giving more scientific evidence for the add-ons that we discussed on the HFEA website. But one thing we need to really consider is that sometimes the patient sitting in front of you may not be a patient, they may actually be a journalist. And this is what's happened numerous times in the UK. I think this has happened in other countries. And in the UK, this program called Panorama is an investigative program, and they had sent some journalists undercover to clinics and asked them about different add-ons, and they recorded this and showed them on national TV, international TV. And then the team that made the Panorama program wrote a paper on the use of these interventions. And none of these people, the authors of the paper, work in fertility. One of them does a couple of them do things around evidence-based medicine, but they don't work in fertility. And there were big errors in this paper. But what was worrying is when they showed the patients being interviewed and some of the things the clinicians said to them, which were really incorrect. And this has happened many times since. We've seen clinicians be on TV or in the newspaper having made false claims about technology to their IVF patients who are actually journalists. So I just want to spend a few minutes talking about evidence-based medicine. And when my students come to my course every year, we run master's courses, we have over 60 students, international students this year. And when they first come, the first week I tell them, you must not believe every paper that is published. And this has got even more complicated now that we can pay to have our papers published, and we have open access, and we have some online journals that are a little bit less robust in how they get papers refereed. But even in the very best journal, how we referee papers is we ask only for 2 people to referee the paper. And if you've submitted papers to some journals recently, you will know you can suggest who you want to referee your paper. So you normally ask someone who's going to agree with what you've said in the paper. You can even suggest who you don't want to referee the paper. So this is really not a robust system. This is a very flawed system that you can ask 2 of your colleagues to review your paper and get it published even in some of the top journals. So for any intervention in IVF, what we need to do is a randomized control trial. We will have editorials, we will have case series and case control studies and cohort studies. But the gold standard has got to be the randomized control trial. So we have an intervention, we randomly allocate the patients into a group where they don't have the intervention and a group that does have the intervention. We don't add 2 interventions at once, we don't do anything else. 1 intervention, control group, treatment group. But we need to think about the studies that have been designed. Are they well designed? Have they got quality of evidence? Have they got intention to treat? So some studies will allocate the patients into a treatment or control group when they've got a number of blastocysts, for example, or a number of embryos, which is not intention to treat. And we need to think about primary outcome, and there has been a lot of papers by statisticians and epidemiologists that are telling us time and time again the primary outcome for anything looking at an intervention in IVF has to be live birth rate. It cannot be fertilization rate, implantation rate. We're trying to help the couple have a child. So the primary outcome is live birth rate. And what we also need to think of is the number of people in the study. If we have a study with 50 people, 80 people, this is not high enough to reach any significant conclusions. We need hundreds of people, ideally about at least 100, 200 people in each arm. And I'm going to show you some examples of this. Before we do that, here's Archie Cochrane. He is the grandfather of evidence-based medicine. And I'm sure you're all aware of the Cochrane reviews that will take various RCTs in a particular area. They will grade them as good quality, medium quality or poor quality, and they will do statistics on those and decide whether together those studies are showing that the procedure is making a benefit or not. And they look at all of these things when they do their analysis. And Daniel and I did a review a few years ago now, looking at the various RCTs that have been published in the Cochrane Review, and we wrote a summary of what we thought had been concluded. So the adjunct list. Now this is a long list. It's controversial, I think, in some cases, but this is the real list where we have to examine evidence-based medicine. And we cannot keep adding on cost and cost and cost to our patient, because all of these cost money. You will not be doing these for free in most clinics. You will be charging the patients money. And what's happening in the UK, as I said, most cycles are not funded. Patients are saving a lot of money to have a treatment cycle of IVF. And in the UK, one IVF is normally about £5,000. So couples save about £10,000 or £15,000 to have a few goes. They go to a clinic, and on the first go, they've added on so many adjuncts that all of their money goes. I've heard patients that spent £15,000 on their first cycle because the clinician added adjunct after adjunct of non-evidence-based medicine. That breaks my heart. I do not think that is fair to those couples. So, I'm only going to talk today, because we've only got 25 minutes. I'm going to talk today just about the adjuncts that have been suggested for embryo selection, because this, obviously, is a hot topic. So, we can look at the embryo, we can do time-lapse, and I'm going to talk to you just briefly about the metabolomics work that was done. Or we can do an invasive technique, such as pre-implantation genetic screening, or as recently been suggested, looking at mitochondrial load. I'm not going to say anything about mitochondrial load because there's no RCTs that have been done. There have been some studies showing a variety of different suggestions about measuring this, but in my view it's not conclusive at the moment. And we wrote a paper in Human Fertility a few years ago summarising the embryo selection methods, and I don't think anything's changed. So, a brilliant study that was done a few years ago, quite a few years ago now, the Istanbul Consensus Workshop, getting together the SIG embryology from ESHRA and the scientists from Alpha. And we have to appreciate that since IVF has been going since the first day, we look at our embryos, see how they're developing, and look at the morphology. I would call this the gold standard, but some people say it's not the gold standard. I would say it is. We have had this for 40 years, and I think we have enough evidence to know that certain parameters of the embryo, how it's dividing, how the cells look, does give us a different implantation rate depending which embryos we put back. So a higher morphology embryo will have a better success. So then we have time-lapse. Now, I want to say at the onset, I think time-lapse is an amazing piece of equipment for the embryologist. I have now been convinced of its safety. There's been a number of studies showing that it's not causing any harm to our embryo. There were potential harms, such as the light, etc., that these embryos were being exposed to. But what are you telling your patients about this? I have seen a number of leaflets produced by the companies that make these that say it will improve your success. So these are leaflets in the IVF clinic for patients. Do you want to improve your success? Then pay to have time-lapse done. Now, I think we need to be really careful about that. I think we have got very wrapped up with these algorithms. A lot of embryologists are busy working out all these algorithms, but unfortunately they don't transfer between labs. Every single lab is individual. Even if their labs are a part of a collaboration and they're using the same embryologists and the same plasticware, etc., it's not the same lab. It's got a different location, it's got a different atmosphere. There's many things in the lab that are out of our control, partly out of our control. We cannot make one lab identical to another. So there have been many, many papers on time-lapse. Some saying there's a bit of a difference, some saying there's not a bit of a difference. There's hundreds of them. But this is the paper that we have to look at. This was the recent Cochrane review that came out last year or the year before now. And this paper clearly says there is insufficient evidence of differences in live birth, miscarriage, stillbirth, or clinical pregnancy to choose between time-lapse systems with or without embryo selection software and conventional incubation. I really had hoped that this would have shown a difference, but it hasn't. So if you are selling this to your patient, in my view, we cannot say this is going to help choose your embryo. We can say it will make a nice video of your embryo, which you might give to the patient, but it's not going to make any difference on their chance of a live birth. Now, non-invasive techniques, there's been some wonderful work done by David Gardner, Henry Leese and others, and this is such a neat idea. Can we take some of the culture media, the spent culture media that we don't need anymore, can we take this and analyse it for its metabolites to see whether it will help us predict which embryo we should transfer, which is the best embryo. And I think this has probably got something in it, but I think the development of this has been very slow for various reasons, and we haven't got there. So a few years ago, many years ago actually, Denny Sackers set up a company called Molecular Biometrics, and they again started selling this machine at ESHRA, saying that it would help tell you which is the best embryo to transfer. It just took one RCT and by Thore Hansen's group to show that this didn't work, and that was it. That this was closed. I put this up, even though it's historic, because this really shows us how this should be done, but how it's not done. And Thore Hansen, you may realise, has done a lot of RCTs on different IVF adjuncts. And the reason why is that in Scandinavia, if a procedure does not have any evidence, you are not allowed to use it clinically. And this is what I'm trying to get brought into the UK. So Thore and various other Scandinavian scientists have to do the RCTs in the hope, they're obviously hoping that it will work, then they can use the procedure in their lab. But unfortunately, Thore's done a lot, and they've all shown that it doesn't work. So I think he needs some help now to keep going in this work, because I think it's really essential. So, PGT. So PGT, as I said, something I've worked on for decades. But PGT-A, I mentioned that when the consortium data used to come through, I was very concerned about why we were offering this procedure. But I was also concerned in the 90s by the quality of the research that had been done. So the first papers that came out from Santiago Monet and Yuri Volitsky looked at 5 fish probes that we used to use then, so 5 chromosomes, and they said the cycles we've done this year were better than the cycles we did last year. Then they said, no, now we can use 12 fish probes. Oh yeah, the old method was rubbish. This new method, yeah, this is better. But they didn't do any RCTs. So then we started, a number of other groups started to do RCTs. And when I was chair of the ESHRA consortium, this was around about the late 00s, so about 2008, 2009. We published this paper in 2010. There had been 11 RCTs done on PGS. So remember, metabolomics took one RCT. There were 11 RCTs using the fish technique on PGS, and still everyone's using it. So when we were writing this paper, I remember having a telephone conversation with Sean Reppin, and he said to me, but now everyone has to stop this procedure. Why are they still continuing? I said, I don't know. I don't know why this has kept going when other things haven't. But in that paper in 2010, we said, until results of RCTs using a different biopsy stage, 10 of the RCTs here use cleavage stage biopsy, when the embryo is incredibly mosaic, chromosomally mosaic, and arrays. So arrays have just come out. In the late 00s, the arrays first got validated, and we started to use them for clinical work. So we have to do a different biopsy stage and arrays, and they need to demonstrate a significant increase in delivery rates. There is no evidence that routine PGS is beneficial for patients with advanced maternal age. That was 10 years ago. A little game. How many PGS cycles do you think have been done globally in the last 10 years? Shout out some numbers. How many globally? How many? 50,000? 100,000? I think well, in 10 years, I think well 51% of cycles in the US are done by PGT. I think 20% of those are PGS, or PGTA. I think 1% probably. We tried to look into it, but I don't think we can get that data. But I think absolutely the majority are going to be aneuploidy screening. So, that's great if we've got the evidence. Do we have the evidence to say that PGTA is beneficial for any group of patients? Well, this is what we called it. We called this version 2. So we said in the consortium paper, look at polar bodies, look at blastocyst biopsy. Don't look at cleavage state. They're too mosaic. Taking a biopsy of a cell here is not representative of the rest of the embryo. And we said, use the new technology of arrays. And arrays are a fabulous, very efficient technique to even look at all of the chromosomes from one single cell. There's nothing wrong with this technology. FISH was a terrible technique. I did FISH for many years. It was not very efficient, nowhere near 100% efficient. So, I'm going to show you the evidence we have in 2019 for PGTA. These were the first papers that came out. The first study everyone went crazy about. This was good prognosis patients. They had an average of 8 blastocysts. Now, can you tell me, what's your pregnancy rate? What's your live birth rate? They were all under 35. Under 35-year-old woman with 8 blastocysts. What's the pregnancy rate or delivery rate? 70%. The pregnancy rate in the control group, so that's normal IVF, was 40%. The pregnancy rate in the PGS group was 70%, which I think is what it should have been, whether you did it or not. So you do the stats on that, you will get a significant difference. But this is why we need to question every paper that gets published. Is 45 patients enough for you to decide that you should offer this? This is to young patients, don't forget. This isn't to older patients. So then we had a couple of studies from the same lab looking at slightly different things. One included some egg donors. They were both very low numbers of patients, and they had problems with them as well. And then Carmen Rubio's group did cleavage stage biopsy. She had started this study before 2010 and before everyone said stop doing cleavage stage. She did 100 patients and she did show a difference. But I've heard her speak about this recently. She said when you looked at the cumulative live birth rate from the frozen embryos, there wasn't a difference. Okay, so that's 10 years. Wow, okay. Now, at the same time, here's us from the ESHRA working group on PGS. There was some fantastic work done by Christina Magli and Marcus Montag's group that validated the arrays. And these are the new arrays. This was work started 10 years ago, validating arrays. We've realised the arrays were excellent, very efficient. So then came the ESTEEM study, the ESHRA multi-centre study. It was hoped to be much bigger, but it wasn't. But it's now published, and there was 179 patients roughly in each arm. So that's the biggest study to date. It shows no difference in live birth rate. And that's without adding on the cumulative. There were more embryos frozen in the non-PGS group than in the PGS group. There were less miscarriages, there were less transfers, but as I said, less embryos frozen. So if you're telling your patient, if you do this, you might have less miscarriages, but your live birth rate is going to be the same, that's fine. They can make the choice. But if you're telling them, oh, you go through this procedure, you'll have a better chance of a pregnancy or a live birth, I'm still not convinced of the evidence. I'm going to show you one more study. Sorry, these pictures came off the website. This is the STAR trial. This is the big multi-centre American trial. You can read the title of what they were trying to do. So, if we look at the last 2 bars first, that is, and it's ongoing pregnancy, it's not live birth. The control in the PGS group showed no significant difference in live birth rate. So that has good numbers, that has hundreds of patients, and that was the primary outcome. When you break down to the sub-analysis, there was a significant difference between the control and the PGS. but this, as I said, was a sub-analysis, and by then we get on to a relatively small number of patients. So this is the STAR trial. They haven't published this yet. You can get this from Illumina's website. So this is it. This is all the data we've got on PGS. But as I said, I know almost every clinic I talk to are doing this. I'm not sure who they're doing it for. If they're doing it over 35 to 40, then you can say 122 patients that had this done in this multi-centre trial had a higher pregnancy rate. I think that's pretty low, and I think, taken with the other data, I'm not convinced. So, PGS version 2. Hans Evers wrote a review. Do we need an RCT for everything? He said we should definitely not lower the gold standard of evidence-based medicine, as, for example, has recently been proposed by PGS. So apparently, because we're putting back a normal embryo, chromosomal normal embryo, then we should be doing that. Why should you transfer an abnormal embryo? But if you know about the mosaicism now, it's much more complicated. Mosaic embryos are now being transferred as routine. So now we have what we call a shade of a grading of embryo classification. If the embryo is totally chromosomally normal, that would be the first option. But mosaic embryos are now transferred. How many mosaic embryos were thrown in the bin over the last 10 years? Sorry, over the last 10 years, and now it's been decided that they should be transferred. Sorry. So, what is the best embryo selection method? I don't know. They all have a question mark. And I think that's where we are. I think that's where we've been since the beginning. And I think without robust studies, that's where we will continue. So I encourage IVF clinics to really get on board with this. And we do good studies. I admit it's expensive and time-consuming. I was very involved with the ESHRA study. But it has to be done. These very small numbers of studies, numbers of patients that have been in these studies compared to the hundreds of thousands of cycles that are done on this using this procedure. So, I mentioned at the beginning the HFEA website. You can Google it now, HFEA Adjuncts, you will come straight to it. This is the list we had originally. We have just added IMSI and PICSI. They have been given a red traffic light. So, assisted hatching, everywhere I go, everyone does assisted hatching, and I say, why? And they say, I don't know. There's no evidence that it increases live birth rate. The numbers on the right are the rough cost in the UK. So, we've got all sorts of, endometrial scratching is going to change to red. Now, there was the big study published last year, presented at ESHRA, that shows that it didn't make any difference. We just haven't changed it yet. PGS is red for cleavage biopsy and amber for bustless biopsy. I obviously think it should be red for both. So it's a traffic light system. So a red means there's no or poor evidence. The amber means there's some evidence. Green means there is evidence. There's no greens. But we're still working out about the best way to get this to a patient. Just one more thing about PGS. You see that it says 23,000. Because what a lot of clinics do is do 2 egg collections, or 3 or 4 egg collections. Collect all of the embryos by vitrification, store them, and then they'll warm them, and then do the PGS, and then transfer them. That's very expensive. That 23,000 was what one London clinic is charging for their PGS package. It's 2 egg collections, PGS, and a transfer. So a few of us have got together last year, and we have written a document. Again, you can find this online. The responsible use of treatment add-ons to fertility services, a consensus statement. I was the ESHRA representative on this committee, and you can see these are the signatories in the UK who have agreed to this document. It is not ending here. There are discussions going on in ESHRA, there's discussions going on with the Cochrane, there's a lot of things happening around this. We want to give our patients the best treatment and the best advice about this. So there is a lot of work going on in this area. So you saw the slide earlier about the future. One thing about PGT is that if we start using this to sequence the embryo and have the whole health of the embryo, I think the PGS argument will be almost redundant, because people will do it because they want to know the health of the embryo. They're not just trying to get pregnant, they want to know the health too. So I do still think that in the future, PGT will be offered to almost everybody, but for different reasons than it is now. I'm not saying it's right, I don't think it's right, but I think it will happen. So IVF treatments continue to be developed, and I really want treatments to be developed. I think it's really important for our field to have new developments. But IVF is hugely commercial, and we need evidence-based medicine. And where we have evidence, we need to be aware of the patient demographics. So if we look at the STAR trial, if you're going to go by that, that only showed a significant difference in the 35 to 40 age group. Even though the ESHRA study didn't show that, but it was looking at polar body biopsy. So you have to be careful about when you're applying this. Are we causing any potential harm? Maybe. We have not done robust studies following up children born after embryo biopsy. But we really we need to follow up the children that we're going to create. So, that's all. That's my team. And